Welcome to Sisters in Crime Australia and Murder Monday, when authors talk about their crime craft. I'm Karina Kilmore, a crime writer, a journalist, and a member of Sisters in Crime, and we have been celebrating women's crime writing since 1991. Before I introduce L.A. Larkin, also known as Louisa Bennet, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to all Indigenous Australians and their elders past, present and emerging. Louisa, welcome.
Hi, nice to see you and thank you for having me here.
Oh, thank you for being with us. Louisa, you write hard-bitten thrillers under the name of L.A. Larkin, and you've clocked up 6 so far, with very diverse settings, including Antarctica and South Africa. And under your other writer identity, Louisa Bennet, you write cosy crime novels featuring Monty the dog detective. Your most recent book is The Bone Ranger, with Monty, the food-obsessed, naughty and totally loving golden retriever, and his sidekick, Detective Constable Rose Sidebottom. So before we get to the questions, can you please give us the elevator pitch for The Bone Ranger?
So The Bone Ranger is about Monty, a dog who solves crimes that humans can't, and how he supports Rose Sidebottom, who is riddled with self-doubt, to solve crimes. And in this instance, this particular one is about a missing person.
Fantastic, thank you for that. So let's get to our questions. How do you write about violence?
I only write about violence if it's necessary to describe the crime that has happened, or to reveal clues about who the killer or serial killer is. And of course, I don't do that. I don't use any graphic detail in the cozy mysteries because that wouldn't be the right place to do it, because they're uplifting stories, and there's humor in that.
Yeah, great. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I used to be a pantser. So it was all about, I had the basic theme, the key characters, and I kind of knew where it was going to go, and I would set off. And it was kind of like going on an adventure, not quite knowing how it was all going to turn out, but you knew what the final destination. But now with contracts, with very fast turnarounds. So for instance, this year, I have a contract to write 3 novels within this 1 year. And so the only way that I can actually do that is if I plot in quite some detail. And so the new series that I'm working on, I've had to pre-agree all the characters and all the plots with my publisher so that I can just literally write with confidence.
Wow, that sounds really detailed.
Well, yes, because it's, in fact, honestly, getting 3 novels done in a year is going to be an interesting challenge. I haven't done it before, so I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. How much of you is in any one of your characters?
That's a great question. I think probably the themes behind the books reflect the things that are important to me, because I think if you're going to spend time writing a novel, you need to feel very passionate about the story, and where it goes and what it represents. The central characters, well, in my crime thrillers, I started off with central characters who were fairly tough women, very strong-minded and resilient. I'm being drawn at the moment to central characters who are vulnerable and broken. I don't know if either of those is representing me. I don't think they do, but I do find that the sort of the vulnerable and more broken female characters who rise to a challenge and develop throughout the story, I'm finding them, it's a really interesting thing. And it creates a lot of sympathy and empathy with the reader. So I'm really enjoying doing that at the moment.
Yeah, lovely. What's the scariest thing in your latest thriller?
Well, I think probably if we're going for scary, I would go to The Safe Place, which is the crime thriller. And what is scary about that, I had to do quite a bit of research into it, but it's about a serial killer who uses crime to cover up his murders. And doing the kind of research into actual real life situations of people who have done that, and the horror of what happens to the people in those situations being trapped in a house, which is what the story is about. He traps the victims in their homes. That was pretty scary, and I had a few sleepless nights after reading some of that.
Yeah, I bet. Do women write different crime stories to men?
Well, yeah, I think women and men are perfectly capable of writing, equally well on any given topic or with any given male or female, character, and anything, in between. I do think, though, what seems to happen, because I'm moving more into the psychological sort of thriller end of the thriller spectrum at the moment, they tend to be more written by women. And I think it's because you're getting more into the head of the victim. It's the terror, the anxiety, the vulnerability, that women particularly can feel if there's a stalker or a killer around on the loose. I think it is a different experience. It tends to be less, direct combat or anything like that. And yeah, so I think it seems to be that women find perhaps they're more comfortable with writing that. Although saying that, I've been also very comfortable writing more action thrillers, which tend to have more male authors. So I just think it depends on your own interests and your own experiences, to be honest.
Yeah. What's the hardest thing you've had to write about?
Oh, what's the hardest thing I've had to write about? I would say, I think probably in Prey, the underlying theme of the story, and again, it's going to be difficult for me to say, but it's a topic that I feel very passionately about. And it's to do with the poaching of rhinos and the barbaric way it is done by the poachers. And so I probably found that most grueling, to be honest. It's not that I've actually conveyed that detail in the book. It's more the background information that I had to be able to write it.
Yeah. How much of a profile do you do for each character before you write them?
Massive. So even though crime fiction and thrillers, and including cozy mysteries, are very plot driven, that's what people love. They love the puzzles, the plot twists, the surprise revelations. But, when you hear people talking about their favorite books, they don't actually tend to talk in terms of, oh, that amazing plot twist, and, this bit of the book when. It's what they say, I love Jack Reacher. Yeah. They talk about a character, and it's the characters they fall in love with, that they empathize with. And if you don't care about what happens to that character in the story, well, pretty much from the time you first meet them, you're not going to go on the journey with them. You're not going to remain hooked. So I go into very, very, very thorough details about the psychology, the sociology, and the sort of the physical attributes, strengths and weaknesses, fears, etc., of the central characters, particularly, the protagonist and the antagonist, so that I can I'm so inside their heads that I can write dialogue fairly confidently, knowing how they would respond to a particular question, for instance.
Yeah, fantastic. When and how do you work out plot twists and red herrings?
Well, at the moment, I do some of that in advance because of the detailed plotting that I now do. But inevitably, saying that when you do plan that far in advance, as I'm sure we all know, when you're writing it, your characters take on a kind of presence of their own, and they, you might find them saying things and going off in directions that you hadn't quite planned for them, but you realize it's actually better. And then there's this sudden ending to the chapter, and it's such a great plot twist, and it actually has come about organically, not because you think you're such a clever author and that you really planned this brilliant moment. And they, I think, are the best. I think when they come, like when they're created like that, almost out of the character's own minds. Yeah. I think they're the best. I think they're really the best.
Tell us something not in your book about your main character. And I think we're talking about your naughty golden retriever here.
Oh, no, let me tell you, I can tell you a lot about my naughty golden retriever, because my naughty golden retriever is based on, I have two golden retrievers. One is called Pickles and the other one's called Lily, who is a rescued dog. They inspire me. And I think probably the one thing I can tell you about Pickles is that he can open doors. So there you go. He can actually, he's a clever dog.
Very.
He can turn door handles, which means we have to watch him very carefully. Otherwise he will go take himself off down to the park.
Hilarious. How do you approach representing diverse communities in your writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do my best to do that and try to ensure that I have characters from different socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds. I also take into account, because I'm writing, I've already got the challenge at the moment of setting my novels, the most recent ones, in America with American central characters. So I also have to reflect the cultures of a character that comes from that particular area of America, because America is like Australia, it's vast, and you have people with very different backgrounds, views on the world and on life. So I have to try and do my best to ensure that happens. But I also do, I'm very lucky that I have an editor who will, point out things if I've done them incorrectly, or if I've, actually not included characters from all different backgrounds.
Yeah, great.
And then I'll, go back and have a look at it.
What's your top writing tip and your top self-editing tip?
My top writing tip would be write. And I know that sounds really facetious and incredibly probably annoying, but it is so true. I think, because I teach, at the Australian Writers Centre, and I have these wonderfully talented people that come on my course, and they come up with the most amazing story ideas. And, I help them, I hope. But at the end of it, I say, please keep writing. If you literally, it's finding a way in your life to find the time to just sit down and do that, finding a place where you can do it and not be hopefully too interrupted. Just getting your first draft down is the most important thing. The question that you asked about editing, I think the single most important thing that I hope will help people is to read it out loud. And I don't mean just the dialogue, because I find it really difficult to write dialogue if you're not reading it out loud. If you read it out loud, you can hear if it sounds natural, if it sounds in character. I think far easier than if it's in your head. But when I'm going through the process of the book, I actually read literally every chapter to myself then I spot that, you know, the grammar is poor or something just probably doesn't actually make sense, and it helps me correct it.
Great. What started you on a life of crime?
Great question. So I've always loved reading crime fiction and thrillers, and I did a degree in literature at the University of London many years ago. I'm sure you can hear my accent. You know, I've been here over 21 years now, so I'm a very proud Aussie. And back then I wanted to write. And then everyone kept saying to me, oh, Louisa, don't be so silly. You know, you'll live your life poor. You know, nobody pays authors anything. How true is that? Anyway, you know, don't do that. Get a proper job. So I went into magazine publishing. Years later, I suddenly thought, you know, I can't keep doing this. I'm not enjoying it, and I'm going to have a go. And so that's what the sort of the feeling that I'd actually let myself down, and I'd allowed myself to be kind of swayed by other people, and instead of actually doing what I really wanted to do. And I absolutely love what I do now. So I'm so pleased that I, you know, took that step and had a go.
Yeah, fabulous. Do you start with plot or character or something else?
I start with theme. Now, I know not everybody does that, but there is something that really captures my imagination. I've read a story on the internet about a particular woman, a particular, I don't know, issue, or a particular place that's really inspired an idea. And I know then that, you know, that's what I'm going to have to focus on. You know, for instance, the inspiration for The Safe Place which is the serial arsonist, was actually the experience of all those awful, terrifying bushfires that swept through Australia, December 2019, I think it was, and January 2020, and it went on. But the whole country was terrified, and the feeling of waking up in the morning to see the whole sky orange and everything covered in ash, and feeling all that heat, and knowing people who lost their homes, everything. And I thought, and I knew, you know, I had to write a story that was set in that kind of world.
Yeah, fabulous. Why is crime such an appealing genre?
Do you mean for readers, or do you mean for writers, do you think?
For both.
I think it's one of the top selling fiction genres in the world. And I think it's because we love to solve puzzles, and we love to feel that there must be a way that we can work out who, you know, the murderer is, for instance, before the central character does, whether they're a detective or whoever they are. I think we just love that whole process. I think we love it because we actually also don't realize what the police and the detectives and the FBI and so on really have to go through, and all the boring stuff they have to wade through to get to the point where they can make an arrest. But, you know, I think it's that. I think it is that. And I think the reason why, you know, authors are drawn to it is because they are the readers. I think just like me, we've all been fans. You know, I was always drawn to sort of, you know, sort of mystery novels and adventure novels when I was young. And so it kind of, and I was never drawn to, you know, romance and stuff like that. And I suppose it inevitably said, you know, if I was going to write a novel, it was going to be in the genre that I loved. And I think people probably do similar. Yeah. Other authors. I
think so. And our last question for today, Louisa, how would you get away with murder?
Oh, I don't think I would. I don't think I would. And you know, the reason why I say that is because, you know, I think we're always creating the most, you know, hopefully you know, intriguing plots where, you know, serial killers can't be caught. And there are lots of stories where serial killers have kept going, and they're very clever about what they do. But I think in reality, you know, the police officers I know, you know, the detectives I know, and also a woman who works in the FBI who's been a fabulous contact and very helpful, you know, when I understand their skill sets and how they work and the support that they get, the technology they have, it amazes me that anyone would get away with a really severe crime. So quite honestly, no, I'm not going to commit crime because I don't want to go to jail. I'll just keep writing about it. It's fine.
Fabulous. Louisa, thank you for being with us today on Murder Monday.
It's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for such great questions.